Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Breakouts, a podcast where we interview extraordinary founders in just under 20 minutes. I'm your host, Akkshay Khoslaa. Now, you'll find many podcasts out there that are 2 to 3 hours long and interview these wildly successful founders after they've already made it big. But by that point, the founders are already 5, 10, or even 15 years into their journey, so their insights just aren't as actionable anymore. We're doing things a little bit different. We're interviewing founders that are on the cusp of breaking out so that you can learn the playbooks they're using to build category-defining companies today. And we're doing it in just under 20 minutes. Now, just before we get started, go ahead and follow us on Twitter at The Breakouts Pod, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and join our Discord community for aspiring founders. The link is in the description below. And I think that's everything I have for you. So without further ado, here's today's guest. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of The Breakouts. We have Michael Gifford again, the CEO and co-founder of Splitero. Michael, such a pleasure to have you again. We're so excited to chat with you about some of the strategies, tactics, and hacks that you've used to build your startup. To get us started, Michael, would you be able to just quickly summarize one more time for our listeners what Splitero is and what it does?
Yes, thank you for having me back on the pod. Splitero offers homeowners the better option to access their home equity without new debt or additional monthly payments. We are working with homeowners to basically get them a lump sum of cash, and then we ride the appreciation or depreciation of their homes.
That's phenomenal. And listeners, if you want to go back and listen to part 1, it was a phenomenal episode. Michael did such a great job telling us about Splitero. Please do have a listen. Without further ado, let's dive into how you think about some of the strategies, tactics, and hacks that you've used to build your business. And the way I want to kind of carve up this interview is into a few different sections. We'll start by talking about product and how you think about making product decisions. Then we'll talk a little bit about distribution, how you acquire customers. We'll move on to fundraising. We'll spend a little bit of time, if you can share a tip or two that you have for founders that are looking to fundraise. And lastly, we'll end with operationalizing. So how you go about making your day-to-day operations more efficient, because I know founders have a knack for that. So to get us started, on the product front, first question for you is, what was your process of building conviction in this problem before pursuing it? So obviously, you had 10 years in the property and prop tech industry, but I'm curious, when you actually figured out that, hey, this is a problem I wanted to go and solve, how did you build conviction around it? And what were some of the strategies you employed to know that this conviction was sufficient? And hey, now it's actually the time to go and do this.
Yeah, certainly. I was seeing it firsthand, right? So I was seeing these homeowners struggle with financial institutions because they wanted to access the equity in their home, but they couldn't for one reason or another. So I was seeing it firsthand. And really then the first step to justify that is to go find the data, right? Dig in, see what's going on. Most homeowners think I can just go get a HELOC, right? Or home equity line of credit if they want to tap into the equity in their home. Well, that might not be actual data, right? There's about 1 million HELOCs that happen per year, and the average FICO is 760. So there's a large subset of homeowners that can't qualify that. We started digging into the data about that product, other mortgage opportunities, and just really saw that there's a need because homeowners are just classically underserved by traditional financial institutions.
Really interesting. And now, Michael, for our listeners as well as me who don't know what a HELOC is, could you describe briefly what it is, what it does?
Certainly. It is a home equity line of credit. Traditionally, a homeowner will have their mortgage, right? And then they say their home has appreciated in value. They want to access some of that equity that they've built up. They will go to a bank and say, hey, I would like a home equity line of credit. It's recorded on the title of the property behind their first mortgage, and they can access a lump sum of cash, but it comes typically with difficult qualification standards and a high monthly payment.
That makes sense. Awesome. Now, jumping back a little bit to the strategies you outlined for conviction, right? It sounds like for you, it was a lot of experience on what you had heard firsthand over so many years in the industry. I'm curious if you had to kind of carve it up into, hey, one avenue for acquiring information to build this conviction was the research that I did, right? Crunching numbers online, looking through different studies, etc. And then 2, actually going and talking to people, right? Asking them questions, interviewing, etc. How would you kind of describe those two strategies? Is there a certain point where you thought that, hey, I've talked to enough people about this specific idea that I have that kind of 80% conviction I need to move forward?
Yeah, certainly. I would say that I actually did those in reverse order. So I was seeing all the homeowners firsthand and talking to them and realizing the pain that they were in. And then I went and pulled the data to make sure that my assumptions were correct.
Gotcha. And I'm curious, I think this dives in not just, to the company you started, but even how you make product decisions, right? I think one thing that founders are always curious about, especially in early stages, before they, have an army of product managers working for them, is when you have limited conviction in an idea, right? Or a feature you want to build. How do you go about figuring out whether you should pursue it? What strategies do you take to gain more clarity there?
Certainly. I think there's a couple things there. I've always heard if you're the only person trying to solve a problem, it might not actually be a problem. So look around and see what the other options are. And then really it's talking to those consumers and saying, hey, if we're to offer you something like this, would that be attractive to you or not? Lastly, a lot of founders struggle with focus. They might think, hey, there's 3 different products here. I'm going to pursue all of them. But I would strongly encourage you just focus heavily on one. Try to figure out what your best option is. Put all your energy there.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's phenomenal advice. Moving on to our next question, still focusing on product. I think I want to understand a little bit more about how you're thinking about product strategy at Splitero. A lot of people go about this exercise of doing OKRs, right? Maybe some small companies don't exactly focus on that. But I'm curious, what do you think is one major objective that you have over the next 6 months? And how are you articulating what are the different strategies you're going to use to achieve that objective?
Yeah, certainly. We operate in a large market. So there's $28 trillion of home equity. And so we will always have a production objective in Splitero. And we've had it since the first quarter that we operated. We had OKRs our first quarter, which I think has rarely helped us focus internally. But for us, that production objective is really just the tens of millions of homeowners that we can serve. And how do we do that methodically, right? We are in California now. We're very soon expanding to other states. And so that's really how we focus on gaining traction, but also growing.
Very interesting. Now, when you talk about production objective, could you clarify that a little bit for our listeners?
Certainly. Yeah, we talk about often the families that we help and how much money that we're able to allow them to access to their home equity. That's the production, how we look at it inside of Splitero.
Interesting. So that's kind of like your North Star metric. Is that right?
That's true.
Very cool. Now, in terms of, your main product here, so far, are you focused on, hey, I want to take the main product that we're building, and from there, I want to increase adoption, and that is my focus right now, or I want to make it more robust? Or at the same time, are you thinking about, adding additional features to that same product and expanding, the scope that it tackles?
Yeah, we're still in our early days. So like I said, we're very focused on our core product and increasing adoption and expansion throughout the United States.
That makes sense. And what are some of the, tactics you're using to do that? Do you focus more on, for example, when people are signing up online, how do you increase retention by modifying UX flows? Do you think about it more even before they get online when they're hearing about you? What are the different, entry points into your conversion flow that you look at and you're most focused on right now?
Yeah, certainly. It starts with the marketing message, right? Is our message resonating? Do people understand the product? Then you get into that flow where they come to us. How is our education process, right? Do they understand the product before we have to hop on the phone with them? Are they stopping at some point in the application because they don't understand it? Are we making it as easy for them to understand, but not only get in contact with us and fill out the application properly? We think about all those things in significant detail. And really, for us, it comes down to ease and velocity. How quickly can someone come to us, tell us their situation? We can assess, underwrite, and get them the funds that they need.
That makes a lot of sense. I think that's a perfect segue into jumping into talking a little bit more about distribution. Before we get super specific, could you talk a little bit more about what is your high-level acquisition strategy at this moment? How are you acquiring customers? What are the different channels, and which channels are your biggest focus?
Yeah, certainly. The channel mix is maybe the secret sauce, but everything else, we go directly to homeowners for the majority. We do some business to business as well. I think both of them have substantial room to grow, especially as we expand to other states to help homeowners. But right now we do both.
And when you're going directly to homeowners, are you literally going to them in person? Are you reaching out to them on social media? What kind of channels are you utilizing?
Yeah, certainly. We do social media, we do search, we do some direct mail. We don't actually send anybody to the home in person, and so that would be a great tactic. I would love to knock on all the doors, but I don't have enough time in the day to do so. So we utilize the other methods.
That makes sense. And right now, are you mostly focused on? Are you guys doing any paid yet, or are you doing mostly organic? What is kind of your mix at the moment?
Yeah, we do a lot of paid and organic. We do both right now. And so we're fortunate to have a great brand and product that people talk about. And so they come to us, but we also reach out directly to them.
Gotcha. So you're saying there's some level of organic referrals that are coming to you as well, right?
They are, yeah. It's very nice when we can quickly help a homeowner access a large sum of cash. That's something that they like to talk about and tell people about. And so they'll they are in a situation similar to friends, neighbors, other homeowners that they know, and so they tell them about it. And they come to us and ask for similar service.
That's very cool. You know that saying where, if you have an action that users are taking already, one of the best ways to drive growth for your product is to make that action easier on your actual web app or mobile app. So I'm curious, have you guys thought about taking the organic referrals that are happening and giving them a bit of a boost by, either offering rewards or, making it easy within the app itself?
Certainly. We operate in regulated space. So rewards for us are not as easy because, say, mortgage licensing or real estate licensing laws are going to govern those. With that said, though, we do thoroughly appreciate our homeowners spreading the word about Splitero, but it's different than other, say, models or businesses where you can actually offer them direct compensation. We cannot.
Gotcha. And that's part of the regulation that you can't compensate homeowners for spreading more word about you.
Certainly.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I'm curious now, you broke it down into that your acquisition is both consumer and B2B. We just talked a little bit about consumer. Let's talk a little bit more about B2B. On the B2B front, who are the businesses that you're selling to?
Yeah, certainly. So a lot of, say, mortgage brokers and real estate agents, other people that are interacting with homeowners and are licensed and have the ability to do so. Our product is unique where if you have a homeowner with equity in their house, we can help them regardless of maybe their FICO score or their income. That doesn't matter to us. And so when someone's speaking with a mortgage broker, they might be considering a refi, a reverse mortgage, a home equity line of credit that we touched on earlier. Maybe they can't qualify for some of the mortgage products available. We'd love to talk to them.
Interesting. And what is the incentive for the mortgage brokers or the real estate agents to refer your product?
Certainly, depending on their licensing, as long as they're licensed professionals, we can compensate them for their efforts.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. That's really interesting. But so just to clarify, you were selling to these brokers, but at the moment you're not selling to large real estate companies, or is that something also on the radar?
Yeah, that is on the radar, not quite yet.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good. I think we've developed a bit of an understanding of what is your overall acquisition strategy. Let's talk more about hacks, because I think it's just always really interesting and fun to hear about how are different founders hacking the system to gain more distribution, right? Is there one hack that comes to mind that you think you guys have leveraged that's either novel or just really interesting to hear about that helps you acquire a good chunk of your customers?
I think that one hack that comes to mind for us, and we talked a little bit about this on the prior pod, is really hiring experienced individuals. I would encourage all founders that are at early stage, try to hire experts so that you have that top level experience. We've done a great job with our leadership team at Splitero. They've built companies themselves. They've been in the real estate investment space for a long time. They have a homeowner first ethos, so they want to help the homeowners that come to us. That is and cannot be understated enough of like when you are starting out, hire the best people you can find.
I think that's a phenomenal tip. I'm curious, unpacking that a little. How would you recommend that, in early stages, founders go about getting that kind of amazing talent on board? All my friends that have recently raised seeds, it seems like that's one of the biggest challenges, finding people to, leave their cushy corporate $500,000 jobs and come work at a startup, which potentially has lower cash pay and greater risk. How do you think about hiring amazing talent?
Yeah, certainly. Hiring is always difficult, and you have to make sure you're hiring the right individuals. I would actually maybe argue with you, if you have a candidate that is only concerned about the compensation, then they might not be the right person for your startup, right? They have to believe and thoroughly be on board with the story and the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Our leadership team at Splitero is here because they want to help homeowners and they see the problem that we're trying to solve. If you are trying to hire talent that doesn't align with that or can't really see the problem, probably not the right person to hire to start with.
That makes a lot of sense. I think very well articulated. Moving on from distribution, let's talk about fundraising a little bit. I think what you've accomplished here is honestly, a great feat. Very young company, just started, already has traction, raised a sizable seed, and also secured $1 billion in debt financing. I'm curious, what is one unconventional tip that you have for founders when they go about fundraising in early stages, whether it's a pre-seed or a seed, that you think perhaps other founders on this pod might not have shared?
Yeah, it might not be unconventional, and it's the hardest thing that you can do, but you have to take in feedback from every investor pitch or meeting you go to. And so you need to continually iterate how you're explaining the problem, how you're explaining yourself as the solution, how you're going to go from 0 to 1. And that's constant. I'm fortunate enough to have a co-founder that does the majority of our pitches with us. And after each, we dissect. Where did the investor get hung up, right? What did they ask? Has that been asked before? How did we respond? It is very much introspection while you're on the fundraising roller coaster. You're going to have great meetings where things are going really well, and then you're going to feel like this is the worst decision you've ever made. You're going to have those highs and lows, but you have to look at the feedback that you're receiving and the questions that you're getting as you're going through your pitch.
That makes a lot of sense. So essentially what you're saying is be very iterative about your pitch. And, I think one logical, deduction we can make from that is that, hey, if you have some target investors that you really want to get on board, think about, putting them a little bit later in your pitch lifecycle so that you're first talking to other investors who might still be a great fit, but you at least give yourself some time to iterate on your pitch by the time you get to your target investors. Would you agree with that sentiment, or?
I would certainly agree with that. I would say iterate not only your pitch, but also your deck, right? Iterate on your materials, whatever you're showing them as you go through and move forward from pitch to pitch. It's a lot of work, but it will serve you well.
Awesome. Phenomenal. All right. Last segment of this pod. Michael, let's talk a little bit about operationalizing your business. Me personally, I think I nerd out on these little hacks that you can use to gain more efficiencies while working. So I'm curious if you had to name just one or two hacks that you've used to make your company more efficient, whether it's modifying workflows, whether it's orienting meetings a certain way. What would you say those one or two hacks are?
Yeah, certainly. I think the biggest hack that will allow you to go quick is hiring. So hiring proper talent and thinking about your org structure, right? Think about your org structure a year from now and then hire the leadership that you're going to need to build that org structure. That's one of the things. And then I think the other really is being able to get in the weeds and wear multiple hats, right? There is a limited amount of budget and people that you can hire. And so you have to make your best decisions of what hats can I do? What can I only do? What can, say, your directors, VPs do, whatever else you hire? And so that takes a lot of thought to extrapolate from where you are now to where you'll be in, say, a year, 2 years from now. But you need to think that far out to start building today.
Awesome. You heard it, folks. Hire intelligently and hire in a way that you're planning for the future. Michael, would you say that hiring is one of your biggest priorities at the moment? Does that take up a lot of time? Do you put a lot of focus on that?
It does. It's so crucial. You have to put a lot of focus on it. You cannot just write a JD and put it on your website and hope the right person applies. You have to go on the offensive, go find people with the experience and the passion that your organization needs.
Awesome. Cool. Absolutely phenomenal advice. We are just on time there, listeners. So Michael, thank you so much for being on the pod. You have been phenomenal yet again. I'm sure there's a lot of actionable tips that early stage founders can take away from everything you've shared on this pod. Right before we end, I did want to give you a chance in case you want to plug anything. Michael, you guys just raised recently. Are you hiring at the moment? Is that a focus?
We are hiring for all areas of the organization. I would love if your listeners, if they're interested in joining, reach out on Twitter or LinkedIn. Happy to have a chat, and we're hiring as much as we can, actually, in the next year. We're growing quickly.
Awesome. And lastly, if our listeners want to connect with you, Michael, is there a place they can follow you online?
They can. On Twitter, Splitero CEO. On LinkedIn, you can find me by my name, and then also just splitero.com.
Love it. Splitero CEO. You heard it, folks. All right. Thank you so much, Michael. This was phenomenal. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time on the Breakouts.
Thank you.
All right, and that wraps up today's episode. We really hope you enjoyed it. Now, just before I let you go, I wanted to reiterate one thing. We're trying to build the best podcast out there for aspiring entrepreneurs, and to do that, we need your help. The best way you can help us is by joining our Discord community. The link is in the description below, and then leaving us feedback. Tell us how we did. Tell us how we can improve. We're eagerly waiting to hear from you. Other than that, show us some love and follow us on Twitter at The Breakouts Pod. And I think that's everything I have for you. We'll see you next time on The Breakouts.